Well, the motor's all painted and it's in the truck. Making progress. That's the Ford Gray. And the aluminum looking heads, but chrome oil pan. Everything's painted Ford Gray. I ended up getting all new bolts because none of the bolts that I had matched. So I ended up switching them out to the grade 8 style with the built-in washer on them. And I just masked them off and then painted all of it and took masking tape off. So looks pretty good. I think it does. Not bad for a mud truck. At least it's all clean. I won't get oily. But I had to put the transfer case on so I could see what am I looking at on front drive shaft angles, because I knew there was going to be an issue, and I knew there would be an even bigger issue with 12-inch springs. So I called Northwest Fab and I asked them about their 205 clocking ring, and that nut, when you clock it down, will end up being where that bolt is. So when I called him, he said you need to cut that ear off so you'll have 7 bolts instead of 8 bolts. But you got to cut that ear off, and more than likely you'll have to cut this side of the mount off, which isn't an issue. I mean, they make another mount for the back of the 205 on the passenger side and another mounting system for the driver's side that replaces the plate. So cutting that off, either way, I'll still have 3 mounts. Solves that issue. Bringing it down, the clocking ring brings it down 2 inches. So that helped with the drive shaft angle for 12-inch springs, hopefully. I'll end up having to put a spacer underneath the transmission mount anyways, because you need to have room for this to become clocked down. More likely it'll probably be a 4-inch spacer. So it's getting there. But when I put it in there, I wanted to see what the front drive shaft angle was, so I put one of the drive shafts that I got on there on, and with it in the stock location, it ended up being at 29.5 degrees, which is a horrible angle. So I ended up doing a little bit of mathematics and theories, and I made a little chart. I took my first one that I knew, did it at 29 degrees. I mean, it's like at the border of 29 and 29.5. So I'm not trying to split hairs here. Just kind of getting a rough idea. So I went based off of that, and I did inches back and inches down. I don't have the clocking ring, so I did theory on it, what it should be. But since I don't have the ring, I figure I'd try to see what would happen if I moved it back. Move the whole drivetrain back. So I did my measurements, figured out some of the angles. I can't go any more than 2 inches back. So in theory, 2 inches back should drop the front drive shaft angle down to 25 degrees. So that's what I did. I moved it back 2 inches, and that brought the front drive shaft angle from 29.5. It's now at 25.5 degrees. I mean, splitting hairs if you kind of look at it the wrong way, but it's still within 25 degrees. With a 12-inch lift, it's going to go way up and be way out, but 2-inch clocking ring, I'll have to get a high angle drive shaft, clock the front axle up with some shims, or the degree shims for it. So it's still a lot of work that needs to go, but figure moving the engine back now with no front end on it makes things a lot easier, and then clocking ring I can do later on, and the axles and all that kind of stuff. So for moving it back 2 inches, if you move it back 2 inches, you got 1-inch overhang on the motor mount. So I ended up using my 2-wheel drive parts truck frame that was 6 inches inside the inside. The factory bracket underneath it is 5 inches outside the outside. So that gives me a 1-inch overhang that I can mount my motor mounts to. I need to go a little bit farther forward. I'm still trying to get everything leveled in here. But it gives me some place to bolt all my motor mount bolts in there. I got these bolts, hold one end of it, and then I end up doing another bolt and then another bolt on the side. So it brings everything together, makes everything secure. I still got plenty of room for valve covers, distributors, spark plug wires. I mean, it's a pretty decent distance, other than the cap doesn't stay on for nothing. I might move it forward a 1/4 inch, but for the most part that's the distance back it's going to be. Then I ended up taking some of the rubber from the fuel tank install and I made a splash panel so the water won't come in between these two frame rails and get all over the belts and make the belts slip and possibly break. So let's just drill some holes, tap screws in there, and then on the bottom of it I got a nut and bolt. I ended up cutting out a rubber circle, take the rubber out, put a washer in the same thickness as the rubber, and then the big washer compresses the rubber against the frame but doesn't smush it. So that's why there's a washer in between. And then I added, that's another piece of 2-wheel drive frame. I ended up putting that in there. So when I'm out in the woods, because of the proportioning valve, the brake lines hang a little bit low. So if a stick kind of came up, it may grab one or it might go up in there to the belts. So I ended up just taking that out of the 2-wheel drive frame. I think that was a cross member of some sort. Trimmed it down, and then the rubbers, splash panels kind of smushed in between it. I still got to take it off and paint it, but here's another shot of the 2-wheel drive frame that is now a motor mount extension. But it made it easy. At least everything's in there. Smooth back. Drive shaft angle's a little bit better. All in all, it's slow but forward progress.